Well, hello and thanks for watching. In this video, I'd like to show an example of a sneaky web viewer widget that gives us color picker functionality. So what's a sneaky web viewer widget? Well, it's a web viewer that really doesn't take up a lot of space on your FileMaker layout, that has some JavaScript, or in this case, HTML5 and JavaScript assigned to it, that allows us to give some functionality on our FileMaker layouts. Now, users don't even have to be aware that this is a web viewer. It really is just something that can be treated just like any other layout object on the FileMaker layout. Now, specifically, the problem that I'm using a sneaky web viewer widget to solve here is that I have a field in my workflow inside my FileMaker layout that requires a hexadecimal color value. Now, my users could have memorized the entire index of hexadecimal colors, and they could just type those in on their own, or they might use a color picker in another application somewhere and copy and paste it in there. But I thought it would make a lot more sense if we had a layout object on the layout that allowed them to just visually pick from a color picker that would immediately populate that field. Now you'll notice that I just demonstrated that by using this color picker, and it populated the FileMaker field. So this is a web viewer, this is a FileMaker field. Now at the same time, if someone happens to have a value, let's say, in the field, but they go right into the FileMaker field and add a hex value, I need that to go update the active color picker selected color inside the web viewer using the JavaScript function as well. So a couple of things here, and by the way, you can use this on macOS. So any users that are using FileMaker on macOS can use this particular color input type, and that is because Safari has this supported. And specifically, the thing that's supported is the input equals color and type equals color. Now, unfortunately for Windows users, currently the FileMaker platform leverages IE11. It's bad news, probably not a permanent state. And at the moment, though, any of your Windows users won't be able to enjoy this new feature. However, if you're watching this video in the future and FileMaker has changed to allow more flexibility on the Windows side for what browser, you can just look at this chart and you'll see that almost all of them are compatible with the color input type. Another thing, though, for the Mac folks, while this will work on desktop macOS and on iOS on your devices, you'll notice that it's supported through the WK Web View and Safari, but not through UI Web View, which might have some implications if you're using the FileMaker SDK for iOS and trying to publish this as an app. So something you might want to be aware of if you're going that route. So back to the file itself, let's take a look at how this actually works. So if we go into layout mode, first you'll notice that I've got the sneaky web viewer widget right here. You'll also notice that I named it. That's going to be important when we see the script running here in a second. Now inside the web viewer, and by the way, if you want access to the same file, you can go into the description of this video and see the download link so you can try this out for yourself. You'll see that we have all the code that it's reading right here in the file. So we don't have to go out to some website to get this. Now you'll notice down here, this is the actual code that I'd authored to put into this specify calculation dialog. And it's only slightly different than the version that is in the calculation dialog. I commented that out for reference. And that's because here, anytime you have quotes, in the code, you have to actually trap for those, and you see that we use this methodology here to trap for those and make it so that the specify calculation window will actually allow this as an input. The other thing that's important to note is that I'm using what's called a data URL. That's this text up there that says data:/text/HTML. That it's not necessarily a hard, fast rule, but it's a good thing to remember if you're actually generating the code that's going to be read by the web viewer right inside of the object itself. You would want to use a data URL, specifically calling out text in the HTML to precede that. So the other thing that you should be aware of is down here we have allow JavaScript to perform FileMaker scripts, and then we've left the default allow interaction and automatically encode URL in place. Specifically, though, the allow JavaScript to perform FileMaker scripts, which is a FileMaker 19 feature, needs to be enabled. And finally, if you go into layout setup, you'll notice that this file has two script triggers on this layout, the on record load and the on record commit, which means that anytime a user goes in and changes one of the fields on this layout, it's going to run a certain script. And that's if somebody lands on this layout for the first time as well, and maybe this value got changed on a different layout. So that script is going to come up here in a second when I show you some of this functionality. So if we go into browse mode, Now this field down below is not necessary to have on the layout at all. As a matter of fact, all you need is the web viewer with this code in it and a field that you want to have fed the hexadecimal value that was chosen by the user. I just have this field on the layout so I can show you the following. So you'll notice here inside the code that most of it's HTML, and specifically there's this HTML input type. So this isn't even JavaScript, this part here. This is just HTML5, the color input type specifically. I'm using input ID color and type color. That's what gives us this functionality. And you're probably noticing that even though the web viewer is about that size, the color picker itself kind of reaches out over it, which is an interesting phenomenon that I've covered in other videos. But the other part of it that you'll see here, which is in the burnt orange, is where the JavaScript comes in. It's actually preceded by the script tag and closed out by the script tag as well. And what it's really doing is saying there's a value that we want to have, which is the color. So let's say this color that was chosen there. We're going to add what's called a listener. So we've added an event listener, and we're looking for the action of change, which basically means whenever a user changes from one value to another, then we're going to set the new value to a variable. And specifically, that value then is going to be useful here. Now this is still JavaScript, by the way, but I highlighted it in blue because this is a new feature in FileMaker 19. It's the support for FileMaker.perform script. So when called, it's going to run a FileMaker script that's called store data from web form. And then it's going to pass it an optional parameter. So in this supported function, you have the ability to pass a parameter. And that parameter is going to be the value that the user changed it to. So this coincides with the event listener that you see there. So that's all that it's going to take to support the user selecting a color from your color input type, and then JavaScript is actually going to send that to a FileMaker script, and then that FileMaker script is going to update the field. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at that working. If we open up the script debugger, so I'll choose another value, and immediately you see that a script is being run, one that's called store data from web form. And that's right, that's the one right down here that's being called by the new FileMaker.perform script function. And it's passing a value, which is the hex value that was chosen. So that's this yellow value that I chose. So in the script, I say the first thing I do is I unpack that parameter by setting it to a variable, and I'm calling out the getScript parameter. So it sets that to a script parameter, and I pick the top value in the array of the script parameter, and I set it to the field called color. That's this one there, and you'll notice that I've updated that value. Now, interestingly enough, what happens if a user updates the field? We would want to make sure that the color picker value is updated as well. So now you see that's the value that is reflected in the color picker. But let's say a user goes in here and adds their own hex color. Now what we want to have happen is we want it to update what they're seeing in the color picker so that those things remain in sync. So let's take a look. So let's take a look at this script debugger in this case, and I'm just going to commit the field, and you'll now see that the on-record commit trigger is running a field called set user data in the web viewer. Now the set user data in the web viewer has really just two script steps. The first one is the pause resume, which is kind of a discipline that you'll have to use for set user data in a web viewer, more so for remotely hosted JavaScript, but it's just good to kind of get into the habit of having that there because you might need to pause to be able to interact with the JavaScript appropriately. But it's really the line 2 here, the perform JavaScript in web viewer script step, which has to call out an object name, specifically this object name, which if you remember is actually named web viewer. So that's why we need to name the object. And then the function within the code that is assigned to that web viewer, we're looking for a JavaScript function called set user data. And that is this one down here. So set user data is a JavaScript function that takes whatever the value is and makes it the value that the user seen. Pretty simple there. So in that case, we're actually passing it a parameter of the value inside this field. So this is how we're keeping it in sync. Whenever somebody changes a field value here, it then runs this function and updates the color picker. Or when the color picker is chosen, it updates using the event listener. It then updates the FileMaker field by running a script using the FileMaker.perform script function. So here you'll see that updated. And if we go back, you'll see we have a full round trip. Both values are kept in sync. Here we're using the new FileMaker 19 functionality to be able to use a sneaky web viewer widget inside of our layout, specifically in this case, adding really cool color picking functionality to our UI for some of our Mac users. Hope you find this interesting and useful. Please download the file in the description from this video and have some fun with it. And I'll look forward to hearing from all of you in the comments. And thanks for watching.